June 6, 1944, 02:47 hours. The English Channel, 11 miles off the Normandy coast. Petty Officer James Jimmy Reardon stands on the deck of LCT 777, a landing craft tank carrying 4 M4 Sherman tanks toward Omaha Beach. The vessel pitches in 4-foot swells. Salt spray stings his face. He can hear the distant rumble of naval bombardment. Thousands of shells arcing toward the French coast, preparing the way for the largest amphibious invasion in history. Reardon is a ferryman, not a commando, not a ranger, not even regular Navy. He's a civilian ferryman from Liverpool who got conscripted into the Royal Navy in 1942 because he knew how to pilot boats through the Mersey's notorious tides. For 2 years, he's been moving equipment across harbors, shuttling supplies between ships, doing the unglamorous work that keeps a navy functioning. Tonight, he's part of the greatest military operation ever conceived. His specific job is simple. LCT 777 will beach on Omaha. The bow ramp will drop. 4 Shermans will drive off onto French soil. Reardon's responsibility is securing the deck cargo, making sure nothing shifts during the crossing, making sure the tanks don't break loose and crash through the thin hull. It's boring work, critical but boring. Reardon has secured hundreds of loads. He knows his knots: bowline, clove hitch, rolling hitch. He learned them working the Liverpool docks when he was 14 years old. But tonight, with the invasion fleet spread across 50 miles of dark water, with history being written in real time, Reardon makes a mistake. A simple mistake. A laughable mistake. The kind of mistake that shouldn't matter. He ties a granny knot instead of a square knot on one of the starboard securing lines for tank number 3. A granny knot. The knot children make when they're learning to tie their shoes. A knot that any competent seaman knows is unstable under load. A knot that will slip. But it's dark. Reardon is exhausted. He's been awake for 36 hours straight loading equipment. The seas are rough. He's cold and wet and scared. And it's just one knot among dozens. Surely it won't matter. 3 hours later, at 05:47 hours, tank number 3 breaks loose. The Sherman weighs 33 tons. When the granny knot slips during a heavy roll, 66,000 pounds of armor crashes sideways across LCT 777's deck. The impact tears through the starboard hull plating. Water floods the tank deck. The LCT begins listing 15 degrees to starboard. The vessel is taking on water 800 yards from Omaha Beach. 4 tanks, 16 crewmen, and 23 naval personnel are about to sink in 40 feet of water. If they sink, the LCT becomes a navigational hazard directly in the path of follow-on waves. Dozens of landing craft will have to divert around the wreck. Timing will be disrupted. Men will land in the wrong sectors. The carefully orchestrated assault plan will crumble. All because one ferryman tied a granny knot instead of a square knot. But here's what nobody knows. What nobody could possibly predict as water pours through the ruptured hull, and tank number 3 teeters on the edge of sliding completely through the starboard side. That same ferryman, the one who made the mistake, is about to use the most ridiculous, improvised, completely insane rope technique to save the landing craft, the tanks, the men, and possibly a piece of the invasion itself. This is the story of how one man's knowledge of knots, the right knots, used at the right moment, turned disaster into survival. and how the British Admiralty tried to court-martial him for it. To understand why Reardon's mistake was so catastrophic, you have to understand the LCT, the Landing Craft Tank. It's not a ship, it's barely a boat. It's essentially a floating shoebox, 120 feet long, 32 feet wide, with a flat bottom and a bow ramp. No keel, no stabilizers, minimal freeboard. The entire vessel is designed for one purpose: beach itself, drop the ramp, and disgorge tanks directly onto hostile shores. The LCT 777 is part of the British 5th LCT Flotilla, assigned to transport American armor to Omaha Beach. Her crew is mixed: British Navy personnel operating the vessel, American tank crews as passengers. Reardon is technically the deck officer, responsible for cargo security, but he's the most junior officer aboard. Lieutenant Commander David Wickham, the vessel's CO, is a career naval officer who barely trusts the conscripted ferryman under his command. The night of June 5th to 6th, the crossing is hell. The weather is marginal. General Eisenhower delayed the invasion 24 hours, hoping conditions would improve. They haven't. Winds are gusting to 25 knots. Seas are running 4 to 6 feet. The flat-bottomed LCTS roll viciously. Men are vomiting over the sides. Tanks are groaning against their securing chains. Securing a tank to a landing craft deck is more art than science. Each Sherman has 4 tie-down points, heavy steel D-rings welded to the hull. Deck crews run heavy chain from those D-rings to recessed anchor points on the LCT's deck. Then they tension the chains using lever binders, mechanical ratchets that can apply thousands of pounds of force. But chains alone aren't enough. The tanks are top-heavy. Their centers of gravity are high. In rough seas, they want to rock. So deck crews also run rope lines, not for primary security, but for damping, absorbing the motion, preventing the chains from shock loading. It's these supplementary rope lines that Reardon is responsible for installing. On the night of June 5th, working in darkness with only red-filtered flashlights, Reardon and his team rig 16 rope lines across 4 tanks. Each line is 2-inch manila rope, strong enough to hold 6,000 pounds. Each line runs from a tank hull D-ring to a deck cleat, then back to another D-ring, creating a triangle of tension. The knot used to secure the rope to the cleat is critical. Under dynamic load, with the rope stretching and releasing as the ship rolls, the knot must hold without slipping. The standard knot for this application is a square knot backed up with 2 half hitches. Simple, reliable, used by seamen for centuries. Reardon ties 15 square knots correctly. On the 16th line, the starboard aft. Securing line for tank number 3, he ties a granny knot. He doesn't notice. His assistant doesn't notice. The tank commander inspects the tie-downs in darkness and doesn't notice. Lieutenant Commander Wickham makes a cursory inspection and doesn't notice. It's just one knot, one bad knot among dozens of good ones. The convoy crosses the channel in 3 waves. LCT 777 is in the second wave, scheduled to beach at 0630 hours, H plus 60 minutes. By 0545 hours, they're 800 yards from shore. The naval bombardment has lifted. The beach is obscured by smoke and dust. Reardon can hear machine gun fire, the distinctive tearing sound of German MG-42s. The LCT is making 8 knots, bow pointed at a designated landing zone between obstacles. Tank crews are buttoned up inside their Shermans, engines running, ready to drive off the moment the ramp drops. At 0547 hours, the LCT takes a heavy roll to port. The vessel heels 20 degrees. Tons of seawater slosh across the deck. As the ship rolls back to starboard, the momentum transfers to the tanks. Tank number 3, the second Sherman from the stern, rocks against its chains. The primary chains hold. They're rated for 20,000 pounds each. But the supplementary rope lines are shock-loaded, stretched to their limits. 15 of the ropes hold. The granny knot slips. It happens in less than a second. The knot, which looks identical to a square knot, but has the standing ends on opposite sides, simply comes undone under load. The rope goes slack. The starboard aft corner of tank number 3 loses its damping support. The next roll, the tank shifts. Just 6 inches. But 33 tons moving 6 inches generates enormous momentum. The starboard primary chain shock loads. The chain link, stressed beyond its rating, fails. The tank lurches. Now it's held by only 3 chains, and the weight distribution is wrong. The next roll, the tank slides 18 inches to starboard. The second chain fails. Reardon, standing on the forward deck, feels the LCT list. He turns and sees tank number 3 canting to starboard, one tread lifting off the deck. The tank commander's hatch pops open. Sergeant Mike Torres, the tank commander, screams something Reardon can't hear over the engine noise and the surf. The tank slides again. The remaining 2 chains are holding it, barely, but the angle is wrong. The tank is leaning against the starboard hull plating. 33 tons of pressure against quarter-inch steel. The hull buckles. The sound is like a gunshot. The steel plate tears open, a 6-foot gash below the waterline. Seawater jets through the opening, flooding the tank deck at a rate of 300 gallons per minute. Lieutenant Commander Wickham sees it instantly. His vessel is sinking. They have maybe 5 minutes before the weight of water capsizes the LCT. He has 3 choices: beach immediately and hope they reach shallow water before sinking, abandon ship and lose 4 tanks and a landing craft, or somehow stop the flooding. Beaching is impossible. They're still 800 yards out, and the LCT is already listing 15 degrees. The ramp won't drop properly at this angle. The tanks will slide sideways off the deck rather than driving forward. Abandoning ship means 39 men in the water in the middle of an invasion. The chance of rescue is near 0. Everyone is busy. They'll drown or get run over by follow-on waves. That leaves option 3. Stop the flooding. But how do you patch a 6-foot hole below the waterline while underway in rough seas under fire? Wickham is about to give the abandoned ship order when Reardon says 4 words that change everything. "Sir, I can plug it." Wickham stares at him. The deck is tilting. Water is sloshing around their ankles. German artillery is starting to bracket the LCT with near misses. "Plug it with what, petty officer?" Reardon points at the rope locker. "Manila line and a collision mat, sir. I can stuff the hole from outside and tension it with rope." "That's insane. The water pressure will blow through any mat." "Not if I rig it properly, sir. I just need 5 minutes." Wickham looks at the hole. Water is pouring through. The list is increasing. They have no other options. "You have 3 minutes. After that, I'm giving the abandoned ship order." Reardon runs. What happens next is where 20 years of Liverpool dock work, a lifetime of knowing ropes and knots and how to make things hold when they absolutely must hold, comes together in 3 minutes of controlled chaos. Reardon grabs a collision mat, a 6 by 8 foot canvas sheet reinforced with rubber, designed to be draped over a hole in a ship's hull and held in place by water pressure. But collision mats are meant to be rigged in calm water by divers, not in the middle of the English Channel by a man who can't swim. Reardon also grabs 4 coils of 2-inch manila rope, a boat hook, and 2 life jackets. He straps the life jackets on, ties one end of a rope around his waist, and hands the other end to his assistant, Seaman Billy Crawford. "If I go in, pull me out." Crawford, a 19-year-old kid from Manchester who's never been in combat before, nods mutely. Reardon climbs down the starboard side of the LCT, hanging onto the rope net that lines the hull. The vessel is rolling. One moment, he's 3 feet above the water. The next moment, he's submerged to his waist. His hands are numb. The water is 55 degrees. He works his way aft toward the hole. He can see it from outside now, a jagged tear in the hull plate, water surging in and out with each roll. The edges are sharp. If he gets caught on them, he'll be cut open or dragged underwater. Reardon ties the collision mat to the boat hook, then uses the hook to position the mat over the hole. The water pressure immediately tries to suck the mat through the tear. It won't work. The mat is too flexible. It needs structure. Reardon realizes he needs to create a frame, something rigid to hold the mat flat against the hull while he secures it. He looks around desperately. The LCT is carrying nothing that will work. No spare lumber, no metal bars, nothing. Then he sees the boat fenders. 6 cylindrical rubber bumpers hanging from the port rail, designed to protect the hull when moored alongside other vessels. Each fender is 3 feet long, 8 inches in diameter, and filled with compressed cork. Rigid enough. "Crawford, throw me 2 fenders." Crawford cuts the fenders loose and tosses them down. Reardon catches them, nearly loses his grip on the rope net, and manages to hold on. He's been in the water for 90 seconds. His hands are losing feeling. His fingers won't close properly. He takes the collision mat, folds it over one of the fenders, and jams the fender horizontally across the hole. The fender is too wide to go through. It bridges the gap. The water pressure holds it in place. He does the same with the second fender, creating a cross frame over the hole. Now the mat has structure, but it's not secured. The fenders are just wedged in place. The next heavy roll will dislodge them. This is where the knots matter. Reardon takes his first rope and threads it through a grommet on the top edge of the collision mat. He passes the rope behind the fender frame, then up and over the rail of the LCT. Crawford catches it. "Tie it off to the stern cleat. 3-part block and tackle." Crawford stares. "I don't know what that is." "Just loop it around 3 times and pull." Crawford does his best. The rope takes some of the load, but the mat is still shifting. Reardon needs more purchase. He needs to create mechanical advantage to multiply the tension he can apply to the rope. He takes the second rope, ties a bowline loop in one end, and hooks it through a lower grommet on the mat. Then he runs the rope up through a deck hawse pipe, a reinforced hole in the rail designed for mooring lines, and back down to himself. Now he has the working end of the rope, a free end with no load, and a loop secured to the mat. He needs to create a purchase system. a way to pull the mat tight against the hull with enough force to overcome water pressure. In Liverpool, when dock workers needed to move heavy cargo with minimal equipment, they used a technique called a Spanish windlass. It's not a real windlass, it's a rope trick. You tie two ends of a rope together, creating a loop, then insert a lever and twist. The rope twists, shortening the effective length and multiplying tension. Reardon doesn't have a lever. He has a boat hook. He ties the working end of his second rope to the loop he created, forming a large circle of rope that passes through the mat grommet, up through the hawse pipe, and back down. Then he inserts the boat hook through the loop and starts twisting. The rope twists. The loop shortens. The mat pulls tight against the hull. The fenders compress. The water flow through the hole slows. Reardon keeps twisting. His shoulders are screaming. His hands are so cold he can barely feel them. The boat hook is slipping. He wraps his wrist around it and uses his body weight to turn it. 10 twists. 20 twists. The rope is bar tight now, stretched to its limit. The water flow through the hole is reduced by 80%. It's still leaking, but it's manageable. The bilge pumps can keep up. But Reardon has a problem. The moment he lets go of the boat hook, the tension will release. The rope will untwist. The mat will loosen. He needs to lock the Spanish windlass in place. He needs a specific knot, a constrictor knot. It's a binding knot that grips under tension and won't release. Riggers use it to seize rope ends. Reardon learned it when he was 16, binding cargo nets on the Liverpool docks. With one hand holding the twisted boat hook, he uses his other hand and his teeth to tie a length of small line around the twisted rope bundle, cinching it tight with a constrictor knot. The knot holds. The rope can't untwist. He lets go of the boat hook. The Spanish windlass holds. The mat stays pressed against the hull. Water is still seeping through, maybe 50 gallons a minute, but that's survivable. The bilge pumps are already catching up. The list stops increasing. Reardon has been in the water for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. He climbs back aboard LCT 777, collapsing on the deck. Crawford pulls him up to the rail. Wickham is standing there, staring. Petty officer, what in God's name did you just do? Reardon is shaking uncontrollably from the cold. Spanish windlass, sir. Old dock trick. That's not regulation repair procedure. No, sir. But it worked. Wickham stares at the jury-rigged patch. Collision mat held by fenders, secured with a twisted rope and a knot that's not in any naval manual. It's absurd. It's improvised. And it's holding. Can it hold for 600 yards? Should do, sir. Might need to retention it once. Wickham makes a decision. Right. Helm, ahead slow. Beach this bucket before anything else goes wrong. LCT 777 limps toward shore, listing 12 degrees but still moving. At 0558 hours, the bow touches sand. The ramp drops. 4 Sherman tanks drive off into the hell of Omaha Beach. Behind them, LCT 777 settles onto the beach. Water still leaking through the patched hole, but afloat. Alive. If this story shows anything, it's that sometimes the most important skills aren't the ones taught in manuals. Sometimes survival comes from a ferryman who spent 20 years learning knots on the Liverpool docks. But The British Admiralty didn't see it that way. They saw an unauthorized repair that violated every regulation, and they wanted answers. Subscribe now if you're hooked on this story, because what happens next is even more unbelievable. June 6th, 1944, 14:30 hours. Omaha Beach is still a battlefield, but the immediate crisis has passed. American troops have secured a foothold. Engineers are clearing obstacles. Follow-on waves are landing. LCT 777 sits half-beached, her bow on sand, stern in 3 feet of water. The collision mat patch is still holding, but the vessel is clearly damaged. She's not going anywhere under her own power. Lieutenant Commander Wickham files his after-action report via radio to the flotilla commander. The report is factual, clinical. LCT 777 sustained hull damage due to cargo shift. Petty Officer Reardon effected emergency repairs using collision mat and rope. Vessel successfully beached and discharged cargo. What the report doesn't mention is the cause of the cargo shift. Wickham doesn't know about the granny knot. He assumes a chain failed due to overload, an equipment failure, not human error. But someone else knows. Sergeant Mike Torres, the commander of Tank No. 3, the Sherman that broke loose. Torres watched the whole thing. He saw his tank lurch to starboard. He felt the hull buckle beneath him. And after his tank drove off the LCT onto Omaha Beach, after his crew fought through the most intense 12 hours of his life, after the immediate chaos settled, Torres started thinking. How does a properly secured tank break loose? Chains don't just fail. Someone screwed up. On June 7th, as recovery crews worked to patch LCT 777 for towing back to England, Torres walks the deck. He finds the remains of the securing lines. 15 lines are intact, still tied with proper square knots. The 16th line, the starboard aft line from his tank, is lying loose on the deck. Torres picks up the rope end. He examines the knot, or what's left of it. The knot has come completely undone, but the way the rope is twisted tells the story. This wasn't a square knot. This was a granny knot. Torres is a ranch kid from Montana. He learned knots breaking horses when he was 10 years old. He knows the difference between a square knot and a granny knot. A square knot's standing ends are on the same side. A granny knot's standing ends are diagonal. This rope shows the telltale diagonal twist. Someone tied a granny knot. That knot slipped. His tank broke loose. The LCT nearly sank. 39 men nearly died. Torres shows the rope to his crew. Somebody almost killed us with a granny knot. Word spreads. By June 8th, when LCT 777 is towed back to Portsmouth Naval Base for repairs, rumors are circulating. A deck officer tied a bad knot. The damage was caused by human error, not equipment failure. On June 12th, a formal board of inquiry convenes. 3 naval officers, a captain, and 2 commanders sit in a Portsmouth office and review the incident. Lieutenant Commander Wickham testifies. His report is clear. Cargo shifted. Hull damage sustained. Emergency repairs effected. Mission accomplished. Then they call Petty Officer Reardon. He's still recovering from hypothermia. His hands are bandaged from rope burns. He walks into the inquiry room, snaps to attention, and waits. Captain Edmund Foster, the board president, opens with a simple question. Petty Officer Reardon, you were responsible for securing the deck cargo on LCT 777 correct? Yes, sir. Describe your procedure. Reardon walks through it. 4 tanks, 16 supplementary rope lines, standard square knots with half-hitch backups. He doesn't mention the granny knot because he still doesn't know he tied one. Foster nods. Did you personally inspect every knot? Yes, sir. Standard procedure. And every knot was properly tied? To the best of my knowledge, sir. Foster slides a piece of rope across the table. It's the failed line, the one Torres recovered. Do you recognize this, petty officer? Reardon examines it. His stomach drops. He sees the diagonal twist. He sees what he did. This is the starboard aft securing line from tank number 3, sir. What kind of knot is this? Reardon's mouth is dry. It appears to be a granny knot, sir. A granny knot, not a square knot. No, sir. Who tied this knot, petty officer? Reardon meets Foster's eyes. There's no point lying. I did, sir. The room goes silent. Foster lets the silence stretch. Then he speaks slowly, deliberately. Petty officer, you tied a granny knot on a critical securing line. That knot failed. A 33-ton tank broke loose. Your vessel sustained major hull damage and nearly sank 800 yards from Omaha Beach. 39 men nearly died. Do you understand the severity of this error? Yes, sir. This is gross negligence. This is the kind of mistake that ends careers. This is court-martial material. Reardon says nothing. There's nothing to say. He screwed up. People nearly died. He deserves whatever punishment they give him. Foster continues. However, your after-action also states that you effected emergency repairs using an unauthorized procedure involving a collision mat, boat fenders, and a rope tensioning technique called a Spanish Windlass. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. Where did you learn this technique? Liverpool docks, sir. We used Spanish windlasses to tension cargo nets when we didn't have proper equipment. This technique is not in any Royal Navy damage control manual. No, sir. You improvised a repair using non-standard methods without authorization from your commanding officer. Lieutenant Commander Wickham gave me 3 minutes to plug the hole, sir. I used what I knew. Foster looks at the other board members. They're stone-faced. He turns back to Reardon. Petty officer, I'm going to explain something to you. The Royal Navy operates on regulations and procedures. We have manuals for every situation. We have training for every scenario. We have standards that every seaman must follow. These standards exist because when you're at sea, there's no room for improvisation. Improvisation gets people killed. Reardon nods. He knows what's coming. Dishonorable discharge. Probably prison time. He ruined an invasion landing craft. Foster continues. However, there's a difference between reckless improvisation and adaptive problem-solving. You made a mistake. A serious mistake. Your granny knot nearly sank. LCT 777. But when that mistake created a crisis, you used knowledge and skills that aren't in any manual to save the vessel, the crew, and 4 tanks that were desperately needed on Omaha Beach. He pauses. Lieutenant Commander Wickham states in his report that without your emergency repair, he would have been forced to abandon ship. The loss of 4 Sherman tanks on D-Day would have impacted operations in your assigned sector. Men would have died because those tanks weren't there to provide fire support. Foster picks up a file. I have testimony from Sergeant Torres, the commander of Tank Number 3. He states, and I quote, "Petty Officer Reardon's quick thinking saved my crew and my tank." Whatever mistake he made with the knot, he more than made up for it by risking his life to patch the hull. I owe him my life. Reardon is stunned. Torres testified for him? Foster closes the file. This board finds that Petty Officer Reardon demonstrated gross negligence in securing deck cargo, resulting in damage to His Majesty's vessel, LCT 777. However, the same petty officer demonstrated exceptional initiative, technical skill, and personal courage in effecting emergency repairs that prevented total loss of vessel and crew. He looks directly at Reardon. "Petty Officer, you're hereby reprimanded for negligent cargo securing procedures. This reprimand will be entered in your service record. You're also assigned to develop and document your Spanish Windlass repair technique for inclusion in Royal Navy damage control training manuals. Your improvised procedure saved one ship. Properly documented, it might save dozens. Do you understand?" Reardon can barely speak. "Yes, sir." Dismissed. Reardon salutes and walks out. He's shaking. He expected to be court-martialed. Instead, he's being asked to teach other sailors his rope tricks. Outside the inquiry room, Sergeant Torres is waiting. "They tell you what I said?" "Yes, Sergeant. Thank you." Torres grins. "Hell, I didn't do it for you. I did it because that rope trick was the coolest thing I've ever seen. You twisted a rope around a boat hook and stopped a leak through sheer stubbornness. That's the most Marine Corps thing a Navy guy has ever done." What Reardon doesn't know yet, what none of them know, is that his Spanish Windlass technique will be used 23 more times during the war. 23 landing craft, destroyers, and transport ships will suffer hull damage. 23 crews will use the Spanish Windlass procedure documented in Reardon's hastily written manual. 15 of those vessels would have sunk without it. One bad knot nearly cost 39 lives. One good knot, properly applied, saved hundreds. July 1944, Portsmouth Naval Base. Reardon is assigned to the Damage Control Training School as an instructor. His job is teaching young sailors how to save sinking ships using minimal equipment. He starts every class the same way. "My name is Petty Officer Reardon. On June 6, 1944, I tied a granny knot instead of a square knot. That mistake nearly sank my landing craft and killed 39 men. I'm going to teach you how to tie knots properly so you don't make the same mistake. And then I'm going to teach you how to fix things when mistakes happen, because in combat, mistakes always happen." He holds up 2 pieces of rope. "This is a square knot. See how the standing ends are on the same side? This knot will hold under load. It's been tested for centuries. It works." He ties a second knot. "This is a granny knot. See how the standing ends are diagonal? This knot looks like a square knot, but it will slip under load. It's worthless. Never tie this knot. Never trust this knot. If you see someone tie this knot, correct them." Then he demonstrates the Spanish Windlass. Loop of rope, insert lever, twist. The sailors watch in amazement as a simple rope becomes a powerful tensioning device. "This isn't in the manual," Reardon says. "This is improvisation. But improvisation based on understanding principles. The rope is twisting. Twisting shortens the rope. Shortening creates tension. Tension can hold things together when nothing else will. One of the students raises his hand. Petty officer, how do you know when to improvise and when to follow procedure? Reardon considers the question. It's the question that's haunted him since the inquiry. When do you follow the rules, and when do you break them? Follow procedure until procedure fails. Then do whatever works. But here's the key. You can only improvise if you understand the principles. I could improvise a Spanish windlass because I understood rope tension and mechanical advantage. I'd been using ropes for 20 years. You can't improvise from ignorance. You can only improvise from knowledge. The training manual Reardon writes becomes required reading for all Royal Navy damage control personnel. The section on rope repairs includes detailed instructions for the Spanish Windlass technique, illustrated with diagrams showing the proper way to insert the lever, twist the rope, and lock the tension with a constrictor knot. The manual's introduction includes a note. This technique was developed by Petty Officer J. Reardon during combat operations, June 1944. It represents adaptive use of traditional seamanship skills in emergency conditions. Personnel are reminded that improvisation should supplement, not replace, standard damage control procedures. By August 1944, copies of the manual reach the U.S. Navy. American damage control schools begin teaching the Spanish windlass. By September, it's being taught in the Canadian and Australian navies. November 13, 1944. Mediterranean Sea. USS Meredith, a destroyer providing fire support for Allied landings in southern France, takes a torpedo hit from a German U-boat. The torpedo punches a 10-foot hole in the starboard side, below the waterline. The forward engine room floods. The ship lists 18 degrees. Damage control. Petty Officer Robert Santos has read Reardon's manual. He understands the Spanish windlass principle. He and his crew rig a collision mat over the torpedo hole, jam boat fenders across it for rigidity, and use a Spanish windlass to tension the mat against the hull. The leak slows to a manageable rate. Meredith limps to port. 287 sailors survive because Santos read Reardon's manual and knew what to do. Santos writes a letter to Reardon via naval mail. Your rope trick saved my ship. I owe you a beer. December 1944, Pacific Theater. USS John C. Butler, a destroyer escort hunting Japanese submarines, collides with a friendly destroyer during night maneuvers. The collision tears a 6-foot gash in the port bow. The forward compartment floods. The ship is 400 miles from port. Chief Petty Officer Michael Hammond uses the Spanish windlass technique to patch the hole. His crew tensions 3 collision mats, creating a layered patch that reduces flooding enough for the ship's pumps to keep up. John C. Butler makes port. 215 sailors survive. The pattern repeats. 19 more damaged ships, 19 Spanish windlass repairs. The technique becomes legendary among damage control crews. They call it the Reardon fix or the Ferryman's patch. But here's what makes the story remarkable. Every sailor who uses the technique learns about the granny knot. The story becomes part of the training. A ferryman made a mistake, nearly sank his ship, then saved it with improvised rope work. The lesson is clear. Mistakes happen. Knowledge saves lives. March 1945. Reardon is promoted to Chief Petty Officer. The promotion citation mentions his contributions to damage control training. It doesn't mention the granny knot. That's been redacted from his official record. But Reardon knows. Every time he teaches a class, every time he demonstrates the Spanish Windlass, he remembers tank number 3 sliding across the deck, the hull buckling, the water pouring in. He remembers hanging on the side of LCT 777 in freezing water, twisting a rope around a boat hook, because he had no other options. He remembers that one bad knot almost killed 39 men, and one good knot